Talk Zone presents the Geek Speak Radio Show with your hosts, Henry and Romo. Your top spot for everything entertainment and pop culture, including TV, movies, comics, casting news, and more. Now, here are your hosts, Henry and Romo.
And here we are. Welcome back. Geek Speak Radio Show on Star Trek Day about Nicholas. I can go on with him really for hours. We can have him on for 2 hours, 1 hour. We can just talk about nothing but his experiences filming Star Trek 2 and especially filming The Death of Spock.
But The View from the Bridge, Memoirs of Star Trek and the Life in Hollywood. I mean, it's a good book. There's some stories in the beginning that I have to say that for me, I was shocked to know that he actually knows J.J. Abrams, and he knew him at an early age.
You asked me, why didn't you ask him to recant that story for us? The reason why is because he doesn't remember that story, Nicholas. He doesn't remember that story. He does remember being at J.J.'s bar mitzvah. He remembers that, and he remembers giving him a copy of the complete works of Sherlock Holmes.
I wanted to know, was there, when we have JJ on to see, was there at a point, did he ever go to Nicholas Myers for it?
They may have talked to each other, but before we go to Rod Roddenberry in a second, let me give you guys that story real quick that Nicholas kind of remembers it now because everybody just keeps reminding him of it now, especially now that the new Star Trek came out. The story is Nicholas Meyer was good friends with J.J. Abrams' parents.
Yeah.
And he went to visit the parents, just social visit. Hey, how you doing? Have for dinner or whatever. The parents had a kid. He was 9 years old, I believe, but 9 or 10 years old at the time.
Yeah. And
what that kid liked to do for fun was record prank calls. He would just open up the phone book, call numbers, and
prank call.
That little kid came to Nicholas Meyer when he was visiting the parents. And he said, "Hey, you want to record a prank call with me?" And Nicholas said, "Yeah, what the hell? Why not? Let's go do it." So they went and did it. And, flash forward to 20-some years later, that kid ended up doing what Nicholas Meyer did, which is directing or rebooting, I should say, Star Trek. He did the new Star Trek last year, and Nicholas did Star Trek 2,
wow.
And so on and so forth. So, like I said, Nicholas doesn't remember that story. We talked. I emailed and called him before.
Small world, literally falling into the footsteps of Nicholas Meyer. Who would know?
Although he didn't marry anybody there, because that was funny. That story was telling us that all of his actors get married after they work on his set. Again, we're going to continue on now with Star Trek Day, as we're calling it today. Like I said, we spoke to Nicholas and also Paula Blog. Now, somebody who's been here before came on here to talk to us about the Roddenberry Dial team. We'll probably mention it again towards the end of the interview. But today we're going to talk to him about what he's pretty much always going to be known for because of the last name, and that's Star Trek. So, Rod, are you there?
I'm here, guys.
Hey, Rod, welcome back to the Geek Speak Radio Show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Before we get into Trek Nation itself, let's talk a little bit more about you. We spoke about yourself the last time you were here. Before I get into the question, let me start by telling you a story. I just mentioned one about Nicholas. Walt Disney.
It sounded interesting.
Yeah, Walt Disney, when he was still alive, one of his daughters, they didn't know that Walt Disney was that Walt Disney, the one that created Mickey Mouse, until I think it was Diane Disney, as a matter of fact. A classmate of hers said, "Hey, did you know your dad is the one that created Mickey Mouse?" And then she ran home, after school, of course, but she ran home and said, Dad, you're the one that created Mickey Mouse? And he said, well, yeah, I am. Good, cool. Can I have your autograph? So the point of that is she didn't know that Walt Disney was that Walt Disney, the one that created Mickey Mouse. For
right.
You, what was the point when you realized that your dad was that Gene Roddenberry?
Yeah. It's hard to say. It's knowing that he produced a TV show called Star Trek and getting what Star Trek's really all about are two different things. As a kid, I didn't get Star Trek, and I didn't watch it, and I didn't care. I was a Dukes of Hazzard Knight Rider kind of kid. And, I kind of tell the same story over and over, and I'll make it brief, but it really wasn't, this might be an exaggeration. I can't pinpoint it in my head, but it really wasn't until he passed away that I really started to understand what Star Trek was and therefore what he had created. So I remember being a little kid working on the set, 13 years old, working on the set of The Next Generation. And I knew my father had created it, but, I guess I didn't care. I just didn't care what he did. I didn't like the show. I didn't watch the show. Again, when I was 13, I started to get into Next Generation, and I thought it was cool. But again, I didn't get it. So it really wasn't until he passed away and I started to talk to people. I saw all the people come to the memorial service, I read some of the cards and letters that came in. I started to read some of his materials. I started to watch some of the shows that I was really sort of just awestruck by the power and the grandeur of what Star Trek was. So,
right.
to answer your question, I was 17, actually, before I got it.
And when did you realize that, hey, Mom's involved in this too? When did you come to that realization?
I'd say I think it took a few more years because he passed away in my senior year of high school, and then I went off to college. And, it started to brew and digest, and I started to figure out more. And then I kind of came home to see how my mother was, like, holding the torch and keeping everything going. I saw her, playing the part of Loxana and started to really pay attention at conventions and see that she wasn't there just selling merchandise. She was there as, and not just as Gene Roddenberry's wife, but as Loxana Troy, the voice of the computer, Nurse Chapel, and the admiration. It's really through everyone else's eyes that I was able to see Star Trek and who my parents really were. It certainly didn't have an unprivileged childhood, but did not grow up with the warmth and really understanding who they were.
When you say you understood, did you understand the impact not only on the fans but just on our culture and the world?
Starting 17 years old, yeah, when I started to hear the stories on stage at my father's memorial service about how this science fiction TV show changed lives, it inspired people, it gave them hope for the future, and that was when I really had to. That's when my eyes sort of opened to it and started to say, really, this Star Trek thing that my father did. It's not just some guys with laser guns. So that was when I really started to figure it out. And then going to conventions, I was no longer sort of passive at conventions. I was a little bit more involved and active and walking around and talking to people and listening to stories and asking questions. And that was when my journey started to figure out what Star Trek and who Gene Roddenberry were.
So you also mentioned the last time you were here that a lot of astronauts, they actually are Star Trek fans, and they're astronauts because of their love for Star Trek.
Yeah, no. And I've met plenty of people at JPL and Ames Research and all these places that grew up with Star Trek, and it gave them this sort of vision of the future where, things would be better and they could be a part, they could make it happen. Star Trek there's two kinds of Star Trek fans, I think. There's kinds out there that sort of sit on the couch, watch the show, and say, boy, I can't wait till that happens. I'll probably never see it in my lifetime. And they're the other ones who say, oh my God, look at what we're capable of as a species. Oh my God, I can be one of the people who makes this happen. Oh my God, I'm going to go out and do something. And those are the ones who really kind of bring Star Trek. Those are the ones that have kept it alive. Those are the ones who have really, I think, keep the philosophy and keep spurring on the philosophy for everyone.
We're talking to Rod Roddenberry. He's going to come on here. We're going to talk in a little bit about his documentary that he's doing, Trek Nation. We'll talk a little bit more about his memories of his mom, his dad, and, growing up with Star Trek around him. We're going to take a break. When we come back, like I said, we'll continue the conversation with Rod Roddenberry, so stay right there.
Geek Speak Radio Show will be right back.